I know a lot of people out there are having a subpar experience with WordPress. You might be trying to run WooCommerce for your e-com store and just finding that everything is really sluggish, or maybe worst case scenario, you keep getting errors when people go to the checkout screen. Now, a lot of times these people are thinking that WordPress itself is just slow and buggy and they need to move over to another platform. But that's not always the case. In fact, most of the time, the culprit is just an underpowered server for the type of applications that you're trying to run. Really, what you need to do is migrate your website from whatever shared hosting plan you're on over to Cloudways. Now, Cloudways is the sponsor of this video, but I've been using Cloudways since 2017 and I have no problem recommending it whether or not I get paid. So really what I wanted to do was find a way to make it easy for people to move over to better hosting. I think in large, that's gonna make the entire WordPress ecosystem more secure, more enjoyable, and just have less people complaining. So I put together this comprehensive checklist to help everybody get moved from whatever hosting platform they're on over to Cloudways. You can see it is very, very comprehensive. And in this video, I'm gonna go through the whole thing. By the way, you can get this checklist completely for free in the description. I know there's a lot of other migration videos out there, but they tend to leave a lot out. They basically start with install this plugin, click this button, and then boom, magically your site has been transformed and relocated across the globe to a faster server. But it's just not that easy. What if you already have an e-commerce store? How do you make sure that no new orders come in when you're migrating the site? Or what about the DNS settings? How do you get everything switched over so that your site isn't down for hours or even worse, days and days as you try to perform this migration process? There are a lot of problems that can come up, and of course, I won't be able to address absolutely every anomaly in this video, but I'm gonna do my best to make sure I get as many as I've encountered over my decade plus of migrating WordPress websites. So you're really just gonna need three things to follow along with this video. One, you'll need a Cloudways account, and for that, I've got a link in the description. Two, you are going to need an existing WordPress website. So here is mine. Very important that you have administrator access to this website. And the last thing you're gonna need is DNS records. These are my DNS records. Yours might be on your hosting platform itself, or they could be on a place where you bought your domain name like GoDaddy or maybe Namecheap. Now, as long as you have access to all three of those things, we will be able to complete our migration. However, I do want to throw this out there that if you're signing up for Cloudways and you've never migrated a site before, they give you your first migration for free. So if you want to let a professional do this for you, well, it won't cost you a dime. Just go ahead and click that link in the description and they'll get you sorted out. I have used their migration service before, but that was many years in the past. These days, I like to do migrations myself, and maybe you do too. So let's get started. Let's move a WordPress website from some other server over to Cloudways. All right, as we proceed with this migration, I'm going to be following along with this checklist point by point. I might not do absolutely everything on the list, but when I skip something, I'll talk about why I'm skipping it and when you might need to pay more attention. So the first thing is we're going to say, all right, we've got admin access to our website. We have our DNS settings, and I have a Cloudways account. If you don't, make sure you click my little link right here. Go ahead and get signed up, and then you're going to see something that looks like this. So this is the Cloudways interface, and we're gonna get right into creating a server in a moment. But before we do, I wanna take a little bit of inventory on our existing website. So we're gonna skip over this notes section and go right to the pre-migration preparation. The first thing that I recommend that you do is take a full backup of your existing website. Now, I have regular backups on this website already, so I'm gonna go ahead and check this box. Hopefully you know how to take a backup of your website. If you don't, that'll be for another video, but definitely reach out to your host and just make sure you've got a backup before you change anything. I don't want you to lose any data. The next step is to document our current server settings. This is going to include our PHP version, our memory limits, our max upload size, and our max execution time. Now, you might be thinking, oh, great, now I gotta go find my login for the Cpanel web host that I'm using, but did you know this is all available right inside of your WordPress admin area? So get logged in and go to your admin dashboard, go down to Tools, Site Health, and then if you click on Server, you'll be able to see everything that we need. Here is the PHP version. I'm on 8.1. We've got our PHP memory limit, which is 768. My time limit is currently set to 30, and the max upload size is 64 megabytes. Now, the easiest thing to do here is just go back up to the top and click on this button that says Copy Site Info to Clipboard. That's going to gather up all of your information for your existing website. You can save that to a file somewhere on your desktop just to make sure you have it to double check everything after we complete the migration. So that's going to take care of all of these items in our checklist. And in fact, it even includes the list of active plugins and their versions. You can see right here, the active plugins are displayed, and we can see all of them that are installed and their current versions. Now, in addition to saving that text file, you might want to go around to other areas of your WordPress website that has sensitive information and take some screenshots. Like maybe you want to capture how many transactions have gone through on WooCommerce. I'm going to go through a way to make sure that no new transactions come in during the migration, but it's always good to make sure that you have a record of exactly where you are at before the migration begins. So I would do this for any of your major plugins or anything that has settings that you know are a little bit finicky. Go ahead and just document them to the best of your ability. Chances are nothing is going to go wrong, but it's always nice to have a source of truth. Now keep in mind, we're not deleting your old site. So after everything is moved over, the other site is still going to exist. I just want to make it easy for you to have some documentation for where everything was at the time of the migration. Now this next option here to lower your DNS TTL values is optional. Notice in parentheses, it says, if possible. Basically what a TTL value is time to live. So as we're making changes to our DNS records, you can see the TTL over here. I've got set to 2 minutes on many of these. Some of them are set to auto. Basically, the lower this value is, the faster the DNS changes will happen, and we'll be able to make the migration more smoothly from the old server over to the new one. To edit these, you'll just need to log into your existing DNS provider. So that might be your Cpanel host, or it could be something like GoDaddy. Just think about wherever you bought your domain name. Start there. Often your settings will be there, but if you're using another shared hosting provider, sometimes they'll direct you to move your entire DNS settings over to Cpanel, and then you can go right into Cpanel and edit your DNS records. Just look for something like DNS Zone Manager on whatever hosting platform you're using. The good news is they all look very similar. So for example, what we're looking for is the name to be the root or just an @ symbol. This is going to be your main website. So in my case, it's serversavant.com. Now, if I click on edit right here, I can see there is an option for TTL. I can make this as low as 1 minute if I want to, or even just set it to auto. Some hosts are going to have different options here. You might only be able to set it to 5 or 15 minutes. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. This is an optional step. But you don't need to change everything, just the one for the root record. So in this case, it's an A record and it's pointing over to our server IP address. This is the old server right now. It'll get updated by the end of the video. Okay, so I'm gonna check this box off and let's go to the next task. It says, document all external integrations. Now, in my website, it's actually a demo site. It's not running live traffic. And by the way, you might consider doing this. You could do it as a practice run. Set up a website on your current shared hosting plan, install a template or some kind of placeholder starter website, and then practice moving it over to another host. If you're trying to do this for clients, there is no better way than just trying it out and seeing how it goes, knowing how you're going to react when maybe things are feeling full of pressure, because it does feel a little bit intense sometimes when you're moving a very, very big website over from one server to another. But I digress. Document all external integrations is going to mean maybe the website is using a connection over to ConvertKit, now called Kit, or maybe you're using Zapier on the website. We want to make sure that all of those integrations are noted ahead of time so that after you complete the migration, you can double check that they're still functioning correctly. So for now, I'm going to hit check here, but your task is to look through any other integrations that might be running on the website. You can just glance through the plugins list that will usually give you all of the info you need. But if there's a snippets plugin, maybe look through that as well, just to see what other scripts are running on the website. And then take screenshots, make notes, do everything you need to be able to reproduce those settings on a future website. Now, chances are you won't need those, but again, we're trying to leave a paper trail. Next up, we're going to check our disk requirements. So it says check disk space requirements on new servers. So what we really need to do is find out how much space our current website is using so that when we spin up a new server, we're sure we have plenty of space and that we're not even close to running into any sort of limits. You can find this in that same health screen that we just looked at a few moments ago. So again, we're over on Tools, Site Health, and then the second option from the top is Directories and Sizes. Here, you're going to see exactly how much space your entire website is taking up. The WordPress directory in this case is 55 megabytes. The uploads directory is 66 megabytes. The theme directory is 14. The plugins are 333. There's a lot of plugins on this website. Then the database is only 84 megabytes. Altogether, it's just under a half of a gigabyte, 555 megabytes. So that's all I really need to know is this bottom number right here. Of course, we did copy this info earlier, but now we know in our mind, or maybe write this down on a physical piece of paper in front of you. All right, we need 500 megabytes. That should be included in every single plan, no problem. Your site might be a lot bigger though, and that might mean that you want to clean things up before the migration. So take a look around and see if there's any wasted space, duplicated files, things that are not necessary to make the actual move. Well, clean them up before the migration. It'll make your life a lot easier. All right, in our next step, we're gonna actually get started with Cloudways. So head over to Cloudways' website, click on the Start Free button here, and you'll be able to get going. Now, I will drop down below the best deal on Cloudways currently. Now, I'm not gonna mention it in the video because that's gonna change throughout time. So go ahead and check my link in the description. If there's currently a sale running, I'll make sure to note it in the description. If there's not currently a sale running, you can at least use my name, Dave Swift, no spaces, in the promo code section, and that'll get you 10 bucks credits so you can get going with your Cloudways server. All right, so once you're logged into Cloudways, it'll look something like this. Through the sign up process, they'll actually kick you into this screen to create your very first server. Now, if you're used to shared hosting, this is gonna look a little bit intimidating, but it really doesn't need to be. So all we're doing here is choosing which application we wanna run. In this case, it's gonna be WordPress, and I can give it a name. I'm just gonna call this Server Servant. And then I'll give the server a name. I'll just call it SSWP. And then you can put everything into a project if you want to. I'm gonna put it into a folder called Dave Sites. This is just organizational. Don't get hung up on this, but you can always add projects if you like. In the next step, we're gonna choose our host. You can choose between DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, Amazon, and Google. Now, wait a minute, choosing our host, I thought Cloudways was our host. Well, actually, Cloudways is just a control panel that's going to work with any of these commodity server providers. Now, incidentally, DigitalOcean purchased Cloudways a few years back, so I'm gonna choose that for this video, but you can choose whichever one you prefer. The next thing we need to decide is our server size. So this is essentially how fast of a computer do we want to run our website. Now, you're in a little bit of a conundrum here because just like a real computer, you don't want to buy one that's got power you're never going to use, but you also don't want something that's going to be slow and maybe reproduce some of the same problems you're already experiencing on your existing server. So I usually recommend people start with this 2 gig server unless you're already doing a lot of traffic. In that case, go up to the 4 gig server. Now, this is the amount of RAM that you have available, but you'll notice these little stopwatches below some of the settings. Those are going to have faster cores or faster CPUs. If you're doing a lot of transactional stuff like WooCommerce or like LearnDash, online courses, those sort of things, definitely go for one of those faster CPUs. You're really gonna see the benefit. My general rule of thumb for this sort of thing is if you have a dynamic website, meaning that it's running WooCommerce or online courses, you're gonna wanna have its own server for that site. However, if it's more of a lead generation site that doesn't have any dynamic content on it, well, then you could have one server that has maybe 10 or 15 sites on it. I like to keep them more on the medium size, have multiple servers. That way, if something does go down, I don't have 100 clients breaking at once. But yeah, kind of keep that in mind. Are you running an e-commerce business? Get your own server for your own website. But if you're serving lots of clients, let's say you work with plumbers or painters, and you can bundle all of those up onto a single server, no problem at all. Just keep in mind that if in the future they want to run an appointment booking tool or maybe a Kanban tool inside of WordPress, well, that's going to take more CPU power, and then you'll have to either bump up the specs or move them off to their own server. The other thing that eats up a lot of CPU cycles is running your own email marketing. So if you're doing a Fluent CRM, funnel kit type of thing, definitely bump that up and have its own dedicated server. All right, next up, I'm gonna choose a location. New York is gonna be just fine with me, but there are locations all over the world. So pick whatever is closest to where your clients will be visiting the website. Now, that isn't as important as you might think it is because later we can distribute the website through a CDN and edge cache it literally everywhere if we choose. But for now, I'm gonna go with New York and we'll go ahead and launch this server. Now, keep in mind, this is our destination server. Our source server that's currently online is in another location altogether. It's currently running and everything is working fine. This is nice because we can work on the Cloudways server, get everything all set up, and move all of the files over. Well, the old server is still kicking away and doing just fine, or at least as good as it was before we decided to migrate, which, probably having some trouble already since we're migrating, but we have a little bit of, the pressure is not on yet. We haven't turned anything off on our source site. So spinning up the server on Cloudways is going to take about 6 more minutes. So during that time, let's go ahead and check out our checklist and make sure that we're on the right path. So we have created our new server. We chose our region. We set our server size based on our requirements. Now, by the way, on those server requirements, remember we checked to see how much space our website took up. I mainly focused on the speed and how much RAM I was choosing, but if I would have just hovered over the server size, it would have shown me how much space I had. All of the server plans have at least 20 gigs of storage, so I really wasn't worried about choosing one to host my current website. However, you definitely will want to check if you've got a very large site that you choose one with at least double whatever size your current site is. You don't want to run into any sort of space limitations and be in a crunch where your website starts failing just because you're running out of storage space. Yeah, and if you want to dig deeper into all of the pricing and the plans and everything without signing up for Cloudways, just go over to pricing right here and you can scroll down and you can see like a 2 gig plan is going to come with 50 gigs of storage on DigitalOcean. You switch over to Vultr and you'll see, slightly different numbers. They could be better or worse depending on which plan you choose. Like I think traditionally, like Google Cloud is more expensive and DigitalOcean is kind of middle of the road. All right, so the next thing we need to do is configure our PHP version to match our existing site. So let's see how we're doing on that server creation. Now this still has about 2 minutes left, but I was just thinking, if you're doing this for the second or third time, you don't necessarily need to go through this entire process. You could just click over to the application setting and just add in an additional WordPress website right over here. That'll save you the time of spinning up a brand new server. This assumes that you're putting all of your sites on a single server, so it's going to be more like those brochure sites that don't have a lot of dynamic content. If that was the case, you would just go right over to applications, hit add application, choose your existing server, hit add application again, and then choose WordPress. And basically you continue on from here and you just get WordPress installed and be able to pick up right where we are right now in terms of, we just launched our server. I saw the little message come up. So let's get back there. All right, so here under my servers, I can see I've got my server loaded up. It is a 4 gig premium server in New York. This is the IP address right here. I'm actually gonna make note of that. I'm gonna copy it right now. And then right up here is where I would add in that IP address. All right, so I just updated my notes here, the date that I'm doing this, the old host IP address, as well as the new server IP address are documented. In fact, I recommend going over to those DNS settings, and we'll do this in a minute, just taking a screenshot of everything that you can to make sure that it's on record in case something gets messed up and you wanna revert back to where you were before the migration. It's all about that paper trail. The more times you do this, the more confident you're gonna start to feel, but you still wanna take those screenshots, make those notes, have everything documented in case an anomaly pops up and you have a way to go back. All right, back to our checklist here. We're gonna go ahead and check out our PHP version. What did Cloudways launch us with? To check that PHP version, we're gonna make sure that we're inside of our server right here. So you choose the server that you're on, then go to Settings and Packages, then click on the Packages tab right here, and you can see which PHP version you're currently on. 8.1 was what I was on previously. It's what Cloudways is using as well, so I'm good to go. No changes necessary. If it's something different for you, go ahead and make that change ahead of time. If you're using something like 7.4 or even 8.0, it might be time to try to upgrade, but that's again a topic for another video. To make it as smooth as possible, set it to match before the migration. That way you're not troubleshooting multiple things. It's always a thing you want to shoot for, is ruling out multiple problems, right? So if you make the migration and everything is working fine, except some plugin is crashing, it could just be that your PHP version didn't match. It's not that the server has any sort of problems with it. All right, so we can confirm our PHP version is correct. We will check this off. And the next option is to check our memory limits. So heading back over into Cloudways, we've got a couple different options for how we're gonna do this, but the easiest way is just to go over to basic right here. And you're gonna look, and these are all of the numbers we were looking at before. The execution limit being 300 seconds. I think mine was 30. 300 is a better setting. I'm going to leave it at that. The max upload size was 64. I'm going to leave this at 100 because, again, that's a little bit better setting. So just because the website said one thing, you might want to improve upon it or change those numbers if you know what they mean. Basically, execution time is how long a process has to run before the website says, hey, that's not enough time. So if you run into any errors, setting this to be a little bit longer can be a good thing. Upload size, obviously that means we can upload larger files. And then the memory limit, I do need to increase this. I'm going to go up to 768. While I'm here, I might as well set the time zone and hit save changes. Okay, now I'm making these changes at the server level, which means it will affect all websites that are on this server. We can do this on a site-by-site basis as well inside of Cloudways. Let me show you how to do this. Just go over to My Applications on the left-hand sidebar, choose the application that you want to change. Now, I'm still kind of waiting for this to process, so give Cloudways a moment. It's ready. We're going to go into the advanced settings down here, application settings, then PHP FPM settings. And here is a text window where we can override those server settings and set it on a site-by-site basis. I recommend leaving this alone unless you're really sure you know what you're doing. All right, I'm going to tick off the check memory limits option and we'll move to the next task, which is to install the Cloudways Migration plugin on our source website. Source meaning this is the one that's currently live, right? So let's head over here. This is my WordPress website. We were looking at the site health earlier. I'm going to go under the plugins option right there and we'll choose plugins, add new. I'm going to search for Cloudways in the search box. And here it is, the second option, the Cloudways WordPress Migrator. I'm going to go ahead and install this and hit activate. And here we go. It says migrate your site to Cloudways. Don't have time? Let us migrate your site for free. Remember, they do it for free if you're getting nervous. But let's go ahead and enter in our email address here. Now, you might be tempted to be like, well, I don't want to give them my email address. They're going to spam me. No, they are not, but they will send you updates about the migration as it proceeds. So definitely enter a real email address in here that you can check those notifications unless you just want to sit here staring at your screen the entire time. Trust me, you don't. So check the box, go ahead and hit migrate. And now we get a little form where we just fill out the form and the site migration happens seamlessly. So what plan are we moving to? Are we on Cloudways Flexible or Cloudways Autonomous? I've actually got a video on Autonomous. I'll link to that in the description so you can check it out. But what we've been talking about in this video is their regular flexible plan. Autonomous just means that it will scale up the website's resources as needed. This is a little bit more expensive, but if you have large bursts of traffic and you never want to go down, you might want to consider Autonomous, but I digress. Next thing we're going to do is enter in the destination site URL. Now here you might be tempted to type in your existing URL, but that's where your website is currently. So what we need to do is go over to Cloudways and get their kind of funky looking URL. Don't worry, we're going to change it later and I'm going to go through every single setting, but let's find that over on Cloudways. Okay, so once again, we're on My Applications, choose the destination where you want to go to, and right over here, we get our application URL. So what we're gonna do is just load this up in a new tab. Here it is, kind of a plain, boring WordPress website. I'm gonna copy that URL, so I've got it now on my clipboard, and then we'll head right back over to the form and paste it in. The next thing they want is the SFTP host as well as the database name. Then we'll need a username and password for SFTP. All right, one step at a time. Let's not get overwhelmed. Let's start with the server address. That's your public IP. That's right here. So I can click this little button. It's copied to my clipboard, back over to my form, and I'll paste it in. Next up, we need our database name. Back to Cloudways, DB name. You guessed it, that's the one. Copied and pasted it in. Next up, we have our SFTP username and SFTP password. A little trick here, you could create a SFTP password right here for the application, or you could just use the master password for the whole server. So that's what I'm gonna do for this video since it's only got one website on it. I'm gonna go over to all servers, I'll find my server, and now I've got my master credentials. I can copy the username here and I'll paste it in, and then I'll copy the password and paste that in. For HTTP auth enabled, that's going to be set to no. What that means is, do you need a password when you visit the website? Not like to log into an account or anything, but you've probably seen a website that just says like, it's not even the website, right? It's just loading a kind of a system looking password login. That's not what we're doing. That's not what most live sites are doing. Unless you're developing this on like a staging site and you're moving it over to production, you can leave this at no. Now for source site information, there's a few questions here that could be relevant. Like I've had clients in the past that upload other stuff to their WordPress website and they want to move those over as they switch their server. So in that case, I would check this box where it says any root directories you want to migrate and choose yes, and then just leave everything checked there. Kind of same thing for database tables. If they're doing things outside of WordPress with their database, make sure you turn this on. Otherwise, for most people, just leave it off. And the final option says, is this site password protected? We're going to say no, assuming it is not. And we are almost ready to migrate, but don't press this button quite yet. Back over to our checklist, we have installed the migration plugin, but before we actually do the migration, we want to make sure we don't lose any e-commerce customers during the migration itself. So for this, I recommend you put your store into vacation mode or put it into some kind of a staging mode. Now, the important thing here is you don't need to take your entire site offline. Your regular marketing pages, they can be up. People can still access them. In fact, you might not ever have any downtime at all for most of the pages on your website. It's only those that will create new users and accept money and take orders that we don't want to get lost on the old site as the new site is being created. Now, thankfully, WooCommerce just recently added a feature to address this. Before that, I would always use a little snippet of code to essentially put my store into vacation mode. But right now, you can see it says live right up here. So if I click on this, it's going to take me to a page where I can make my site not live. So essentially, I'm going to put it into coming soon mode, but I'm not going to apply this to the entire site. I'm only going to apply it to store pages. So I'll toggle both of these on and then hit Save Changes. Ask me to confirm, and I'll switch. And now I can confirm my site is in coming soon mode. This means that no one will be able to complete a checkout and no purchases will be lost. I still recommend documenting how many orders you have on your existing website, because if you do need to move a few orders over manually, it's not very difficult to do that. If you're handy with a database, you could do it yourself, or there are lots of plugins to make it very, very simple. But now that my store is in coming soon mode, the urgency is on. I don't want to make the store unavailable for any longer than necessary, so let's go ahead and proceed. By the way, if I'm reporting to a client, right now is when I'd consider the migration to have officially begun, because this is essentially downtime for the store. So make a note of what time it is, and we can report to the client later how many minutes our site was offline in terms of receiving new sales. If you don't have any e-commerce right now, don't worry about it, because the site is essentially not going to be down at all otherwise. All right, going back to our checklist here, we have officially completed all of these tasks. I didn't mention it, but you can notate the gateway settings if necessary. That could be a security issue as well, so don't save them anywhere in plain text, but definitely make note of them or have access to the login credentials if something happens and you need to reinitiate them. Heck, if you're doing this for a client, you could even just let them know, like, hey, you need to be around in case something catastrophic happens and we need to re-log into PayPal or Stripe. Again, very unlikely, but you could mention it. When's a good time for you? We want to make sure that this is a doable thing if there's an emergency. And we are finally ready to head into the migration process. Now, I kind of preemptively filled out the credentials on the form, so I'm going to check that off. And now I can click on Start Migration Process. So here we are. I'm going to hit Migrate. It's going to validate my details, and we should be off and running. All right, there we go. It says your site is being migrated to Cloudways. Sit back and relax while Blog Vault's robots move your site. And you can see we're moving along pretty quickly here. Most of the files and tables have already been moved. It only took a few seconds. We should see the progress of the overall migration start to tick up here shortly as well. It helps when you have a very small website. Not every site is going to go this quickly. So if yours takes a little bit of time, just have patience. Doesn't mean anything is going wrong. In fact, if you're on a very slow server, that can also slow down the migration. So have patience, let the Blog Vault plugin do its thing, and trust me, it gets it right 99 times out of 100. All right, while the migration is taking place, let's look at the checklist to see what we need to do next. So we've started the migration process, we're monitoring the process, and we're going to document any warnings or errors that we see as it goes through. And then we want to verify the initial file transfer completion. We're getting close here, no errors yet, so that is good. All right, there we go, it is done. Now, that whole thing from start to finish took me about 11 minutes, so certainly not instantaneous, but it was pretty quick. So it says what to do now: connect your domain, enable SSL, and configure settings. Well, I'm gonna do those things, but first I wanna check to make sure the migration went well. So we can click this button right here. It's gonna launch our website inside of the Cloudways server now. If I were to show you the URL bar, it's that funky looking Cloudways URL. Yeah, so here it is. What I wanna do is just check out my site, make sure everything is functioning properly. Are all of the images displaying? Does the blog work correctly? go to each and every page and just make sure it's all there. So far, it's looking really good. Another thing I like to do is check to make sure the URL of the image is correct. So just right click on an image and then grab that image URL. See here, it says copy image address. And what I'm looking for is to make sure that it's not referencing the old website, it's referencing the new one. All right, looks like all of the content has actually made its way over, but I can confirm by looking at my site health inside of the WordPress admin. So I'm going to change the URL to be my website /WP admin, and I'll go ahead and get logged in here. Now, what you need to know about logging into this site is that it's going to take in all of the usernames from your old website. You will not be able to use the credentials that were on your Cloudways admin panel. Instead, you're going to use your previous credentials. In fact, I never even used the ones from Cloudways. I'll just be sticking with my regular old website login. All right, so here we are. I am logged into the admin section of the Cloudways website. What I want to do here is go over to site health, and I'm just going to compare to how it stacks up to the previous website. So go to tools, site health, info, then under directories and sizes, I'm going to check to make sure that we are around the same size. So this has 530 megabytes, whereas my source site was actually 555 megabytes. Uh-oh, I'm missing 25 megabytes. Where did it go? Well, if we just compare between the two sites, I noticed right away that my database is much smaller on the new site. Here's the old site, it's 83 megabytes here. And on the new site, it is 55 megabytes. So what gives? Well, during the migration process, the database gets optimized. Basically, some of the fat gets trimmed. No data is lost, but everything is going to be made a little bit more efficient. So if all you see is a slight discrepancy in the size of your database, you can feel pretty safe that everything else was moved. The other numbers should match exactly, like upload size, we want that to be precisely the same. So here it is prior, 66.74. And here it is on the destination site, 66.74. All of the images made it over. But this stage of testing is very important. Definitely go through the entire website, make sure all of the features work and that everything is there. All right, so I'm going to check some more boxes over here. My media files are present, WordPress core is working, and I've gotten into the admin panel. Now the next step is to get your custom domain attached over on Cloudways. To do this, we can do it the straightforward way, or we can do it the technical way. So what I mean by the technical way is we would actually spoof your computer's local DNS settings so that we could see what it would be like to use the website with a certain URL. So in this case, I'm going to be switching the URL over from the Cloudways address to serverservant.com. Now, I'm not actually going to go through this in this video, but if you want to know more about DNS spoofing, when it's useful and when it's not, let me know and I could consider making a dedicated video on that. Most of the time this isn't necessary, but I've included it in the documentation because if you're working on a very large site and you can't have any room for any errors at all, I'd probably recommend doing this. But for the rest of us, if our site is offline for a minute or two, no one is going to lose their mind. Let's just proceed with the normal migration. So the first thing I'm going to do is run a search and replace for any domain references on our website. For this, I'm going to be using the Better Search Replace plugin. So I'm on my destination site right now. I'm going back into the admin dashboard. I'm going to go to Plugins, Add New, and search for Better Search Replace. And here it is right here. I've actually already got it installed on this website, but just go ahead, install it, activate it, and you're going to be good to go. The next thing you'll do is go over to Tools, find Better Search Replace, and the fun begins. So essentially what we're going to do next is break the website so that it no longer works with this domain, but when we switch over to the new one, everything will be ready to go. So I'm going to have you go up to your URL bar, copy the Cloudways address. We're going to search for that, including the HTTPS, so everything in there. No slash, don't include the slash, and then enter in your custom URL right here. So for me, that is going to be serverservant.com. Now I'm going to select all of these tables. If you get an error as you're doing this process, you can do it table by table or maybe just do it in chunks. You can also try setting the memory to be a little bit larger, but usually this should work with, given the settings that we had during the migration, everything should be good to go unless it's an extremely large site. I'm going to check both of these boxes. You can perform it as a dry run if you like. However, I'm just going to let it go because even if I screw something up, well, I could just perform the migration again. I mean, I don't think I'm going to screw everything up because I've got everything set up here. But essentially what we're doing is we're going through the code and we're looking for this URL and we're going to replace it with our own URL. Then we'll go over into Cloudways and tell our website what the real URL is. All right, there we go. It is completed. All of the cells have been updated. Now there's just a few more things I'm going to do before I change the domain over. I noticed on the dashboard, I got a little indication that a foreign object cache drop-in was found. That's because I actually had a Redis plugin on my old website that I no longer need. So I'm going to enable that drop-in, which is going to be the Cloudways version, to let me use Redis Object Cache Pro, a little bit nicer version that I was currently using before. I'll enable this, refresh the page, and there we go. My object cache is fixed. I recommend you go over to your plugins, see if you have any caching plugins, or maybe if you had a problem with the initial migration, see if you had any security plugins that could have been blocking it. You might want to disable that. But otherwise, just check and make sure everything that's there is something you really want to be there. And I'm also going to add in the Breeze plugin that comes with Cloudways. It's disabled for me, but I'm going to activate it. That's going to enable me to use the Cloudways page caching. I do have a dedicated video on caching, and it features a lot of Cloudways products. So I'll link to that in the description as well. If you really want to dial in your caching setup for your new website, definitely dig into that video. Yeah, it looks like Object Cache Pro was not activated for me either, so I'm turning that on. That's because I had the regular Object Cache from my old installation, so we got those swapped out. But essentially what we're doing here is just going through and making sure that all of the plugins are on that need to be on and all of the plugins are off that should be off. And it's not good to keep all of these inactive plugins. This is mainly a demo site where I test out other plugins. So clear these out if you're not using them, just get them off your site. All right, so I've run the search and replace. The next thing for me to do is to add the domain in the Cloudways panel. So let's head back to Cloudways, go over to my applications, choose the application I'm working on here, then go down to domain management, add a domain. I'll type in serversavant.com, save the changes. Now, while this is adding the domain, I'm actually going to grab my IP address one more time. Remember, we did this before. It's under access details, and then you can just copy it right here. Now I'm going to go back over to my DNS settings. Mine is on Cloudflare. Yours is going to be someplace else. And then I have this A record here, an existing A record. I just need to update this. So I'll click edit. And if you don't have an A record or you're kind of confused at what's going on, go into your DNS zone management, find the record that you need to modify. So in this case, it's an A record. It could also be a CNAME record, and they could have done things a little bit differently. But essentially, what we want is an A record pointing to our domain name with our new Cloudways address. Also, don't turn on proxy if you're using Cloudflare. If you're not using Cloudflare, you won't have that as an option. But other than that, you should be good to go. Go ahead and hit save. Now, in addition to loading at serversavant.com, I would also like them to be redirected if they type www.serversavant.com. So for this, I'm going to add in a second record. This is going to be a CNAME record. I'll enter www in for the name. For the target, I put serversavant.com. Again, the proxy status is off for now at least, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. All right, so that takes care of that redirection. So if you type www, it'll go to the root domain. Now back over in Cloudways, I got the notification that the additional domain has been added, and we can start to set up our SSL. Now back over in domain management, currently it has the cloudwaysapps.com as the primary domain. We definitely want to change this. So I'm going to click on the triple dots and choose make primary. It's going to confirm that this is going to make it a primary domain, and just sit back and wait for this to be updated. All right, there we go. It has been updated once again, and now it is the primary domain. The next thing we want to do is add that SSL certificate in. So go right here to SSL certificate and leave it on Let's Encrypt. Add your email address in, your domain name, and install that certificate. Uh-oh, I got an error. It says that my domains are not currently pointed to the correct IP. Well, remember that whole TTL thing? Apparently it didn't resolve in time. That's okay. Don't worry, we can always do this again. There is a site that can help you confirm that everything is pointed in the right direction. Let me show it to you. Here is what'smydns.net. What I recommend you do here is just type in your URL. So for me, it's going to be serversavant.com, and then go ahead and hit search. It should show your new DNS record showing up here, which this is the Cloudways IP. So I am looking pretty good. I could also search by CNAME record and make sure that it's actually redirecting the way I wanted. Yep, that works as well. All right, now that I know the propagation is complete, let's try to set up the SSL certificate again. This time, I'm going to do it with a wildcard. Now, what a wildcard is it basically is a DNS record that I can create, which will allow me to use any subdomain with my domain. So we're already using one. We've got www. That's a subdomain. So I might as well set this up with a wildcard record, and then I can simply add in a CNAME record right here, and I'll verify my DNS, and the record will be complete. So you can do it the other way as well, but I showed you that way, so I thought I'd show you the wildcard as well. So what I'm gonna do is copy this part here, the Acme-challenge with the underscore in the front. Then in my DNS settings, I'm gonna create a new CNAME, and I'll paste in the Acme challenge part right there. Then I'm gonna come back over to Cloudways and I'll grab that URL there. Looks like there's some spaces. I'll make sure those get deleted out. And I'll paste in the target. Yeah, looks like we're good here. I'll turn off the proxy status on Cloudflare and go ahead and hit save. And now I can verify my DNS once more. And it says your DNS has been verified, so I can install the certificate. And it's processing here again. And there we go, our certs have been installed successfully. We can double check this by just visiting our website, making sure we got that padlock. Now, I want to recommend that you also go back over to the domain management section and just add in your www as an alias if you've not done that already. It's always a good idea. All right, with all of that done, let's go ahead and visit our website here. Hopefully it loads up correctly. Looks like we do have the SSL cert. Now, one thing I want to check to make sure is that sometimes your local computer DNS will still be sending it over to the old server. So always log in as an administrator and just make certain that the new server is actually up and that any changes you make locally are going to be going to the right installation. Basically, what you've done now is like, imagine you have a laptop and then you bought a new laptop. You transferred all of the data over to the new one. Well, if you make any changes on the old one, it's not automatically going to reflect on the new one, right? So we got to make sure we're working on the right computer. It can be kind of hard to tell in these initial stages. All right, so I'm still in private mode or incognito mode here, and I'm logged in. Now, one of the things that can tell me whether or not the migration has actually happened or I'm looking at the right website is I just look for those little changes I made when I was shuffling around the plugins, right? So remember, I deactivated Redis Object Cache and installed Redis Object Cache Pro. So if I've got Pro installed here, I should be on the Cloudways server. Yep, there it is, Object Cache Pro. So my migration is now complete. Well, mostly complete. I still got to turn the store back on, and there's some more checklist items to attend to. All right, so going back through our checklist, we've added our domain, we've configured our DNS, and that included an A record as well as a CNAME record. Now, MX records and text records, if you are migrating your DNS completely away from something like a shared hosting provider over to Cloudflare, which is not a bad idea in my opinion, you want to make sure you get all of those records over and you move the whole name server over. It's kind of another video, to be honest, but there's still going to be the possibility that you'll want to update some MX records if your website is currently sending emails through your shared hosting provider. Now, I've got a dedicated video on how to do transactional emails and all sorts of emails on Cloudways. Could be that you're using, your shared hosting provider as your primary inbox, like your main work email. If you want to get off of that, definitely go check out my dedicated video on emails and Cloudways. I'll link to that in the description as well. There's a lot of research to do here, but for now, we didn't update either of these. I'll just leave them off, but we did install that SSL certificate. All right, let's go through and we're just gonna make sure that we clear all of our caches. So I'm gonna check these off a little bit prematurely, and then we want to configure our Cloudways cache in Breeze plugin settings. Back over to our site here, I'm going to go ahead and clear Breeze. Remember, I set that up a little bit ago, so we'll purge all cache. And then over in the object cache, we'll flush that as well, just to be certain. That's under settings, object cache, and you can flush it right there. All right, now we're going to do some functionality testing. We'll get all of the functionality back online for our website, go through each of the steps and make sure they are working. Now, the primary thing is to take your store out of coming soon mode. So just click right up here. It'll take you right into the correct menu setting. Go ahead and toggle it over to live, save the changes, and your store will then be back online. If you did anything else like take down your online courses, or if you're using something else like SureCart or Easy Digital Downloads, make sure you take those out of maintenance mode as well. And now we're going to test the functionality. So we'll go through every page just like we did before on the initial migration, just making sure that all of our images are loading correctly. All of the content is still there the way we want it. We test out any forms that you have on your site. Go ahead and make sure that the email is sending. If you've not set up transactional emails, you do need to do that independently on Cloudways. Again, I have a dedicated video on transactional emails, so definitely do that. I'd even recommend doing a test checkout on your e-commerce setup. Make sure that your payment gateways are still connected, that everything is working as expected. So we're going to test all forms. We're going to check our email functionality, making sure that notifications and transactions are going through. You could even test user functions like registration, login, and password reset. Now, chances are those are going to be working, but you might as well test them. You don't want any unpleasant surprises. We talked about checking our transactions, payment gateways, any custom functionality. So those integrations, check to make sure that they're still working. And you could even do a search on the website if you've got a search functionality that is used by users. Go ahead and make sure that it's all pulling up the correct URLs. Every once in a while, you've got to run that better search and replace 2 times. I don't know why. It doesn't get everything 100% of the time. So if you have any weird anomalies, just run it again. It'll probably squash 99 out of 100 bugs. All right, I'm checking off the rest of these tests. I've gone through and made sure that the website is doing everything it's supposed to do. Our SSL certificate is there. By the way, there's a dedicated site you can use for this. Here's the SSL checker from SSL Shopper. Just go ahead and enter in your domain name here. Hit check SSL, and it's going to tell you whether or not everything is working properly. All you want to see here is green checks. If you get anything other than that, it's time to redo the process. If you have an existing backup system, now is the time to check to make sure that is working as well, especially if it's going off to third parties. Make sure that everything is functioning as you'd expect. If you don't have another backup system, Cloudways has some pretty beefy options, and guess what? I've got a video on that too. I'll add this into the checklist so you can easily get to the backup guide. You could also go ahead and check to make sure your analytics is tracking properly, that your sitemap is loading as expected, and if you've got a robots.txt file, that is doing exactly what you want. Sometimes those things can get mixed up during a migration, so just check to make sure that they're still the same. All right, then the last few settings are pretty straight ahead. We're going to document our new server details. We already entered in the IP address at the top of this sheet here, but you can go ahead and fill out any other internal documentation that you have for maybe you and your staff to manage your servers. Make sure that that's all where it needs to be. I do recommend taking a backup immediately, either using the Cloudways platform or whatever third-party tool you're using. And then just plan on keeping an eye on this site for the next 24 to 48 hours. I highly recommend using an uptime monitoring tool. So keep an eye to make sure that nothing is going up and down. So get that taken care of, and make sure if you've got a password manager that you've got the correct password for the new site in there. Remember, it's going to use the same one as the old site, not the Cloudways credentials. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, make sure you drop me a comment down below to let me know. And make sure you hit like and get subscribed to this channel. It really helps me out to grow the channel. Thanks again to Cloudways for sponsoring today's video. If you have any questions about hosting or WordPress in general, don't be shy, hit me up in the comments. I love to hear from people. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.